They're sliding, losses stacking up, Clay Holmes struggling, and questions swirling about this rotation. But can rookie Nolan McLean bring the spark that they desperately need? We'll break it all down. Plus, Deesha, Thosar, and Ray Jarvis join me this week to talk about where this team goes from here. This is Straight Outta Flushing. All right, Mets fans, it's been a wild week in Flushing, and while the Mets have been struggling in the standings, there's still plenty to talk about. So let's run through the biggest storylines in this week's 7-line report. First up, the big one. Pete Alonso is now the Mets' all-time home run king. He passed Darryl Strawberry with career home run number 253. Then he added another one for good measure. And this is just more than a number. It's a statement. Alonso's been one of the faces of the franchise since his rookie year. And now he's literally at the top of the power list. Alonso also drove in his 100th RBI of the season during Saturday's win over the Mariners. So the question moving forward is, how do the Mets make sure their new home run king stays in Queens for the long haul? That is a top priority. Meanwhile, some pitching news that was tough to ignore. Frankie Montas, he has been officially demoted to the bullpen. Montas struggled to find consistency in the rotation, and the Mets decided a move to relief was best. To his credit, he's handled it with a positive attitude, saying he just wants to help the team however he can. But this does speak to the rotation's ongoing issues with depth and length, something that's plagued them all season long. Now, let's talk about some much-needed good vibes. Francisco Lindor, he is heating up. He just became the first shortstop in MLB history with 5 seasons of 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases. Think about that. Not Cal Ripken, not Derek Jeter, not Alex Rodriguez, Lindor. He's putting together another incredibly well-rounded season, and he's starting to look like the catalyst that the Mets need down the stretch. And speaking of new energy, how about Nolan McLean's debut? The rookie took the ball against the Mariners, and he spun a gem. 5 1/3 scoreless innings, 8 strikeouts, only 2 hits allowed. The crowd loved it, and the team badly needed it. The organization think that he's ready. And based on his debut, it's hard to argue that. Finally, a quick look down on the farm. Prospect Jonah Tong made his AAA debut and showed why the Mets are so high on him. 5 strong innings, 6 strikeouts, and another arm who looks like he could be a factor into the future. Between Tong and Syracuse and McLean and Flushing, the Mets' young pitching talent is starting to arrive. So, yeah, it's been a brutal stretch in the win-loss column for the Mets. But if you step back, this week showed us some of the building blocks for the future. Alonso cementing his legacy, Lindor making history, McLean and Tong flashing some promise. The Mets' present may be rough, but the future, it might just be bright. All right, joining me now for the first of 2 Dugout Discussions is Fox Sports MLB reporter Deesha Thosar. She's been covering the Mets closely all season long. Deesha, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Trying to get through this August dog days and hopefully get into some pennant race coverage in Queens if they can survive long enough, right, to make it there.
Well, that is the question, right? Like, that is the question. Can they survive long enough to make it there? Right now, Mets fans are very uncertain. But Deesha, I'm really glad to have you here and connect with you. I've been a fan of your work for a long time. And I have to let the people know, you're not going to get this too often, where you're going to see a Pitt guy and a Penn State alum on the same screen. And
friendly terms.
Friendly terms. There's going to be no
Yeah,
beef. We're just here to discuss. We're just going to discuss some baseball. It's going to be fun. This is good. Deesha is one of the best in the game in terms of covering the sport. So glad to have you here, Deesha. And let's start off with this, because last week, Pete Alonso, he became the Mets' all-time home run king. In your eyes, how important is it for the front office to make sure that he's a Met for life?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I mean, even just looking at their history and how many guys through their franchise's history they have let walk away over minor disagreements, major disagreements. Obviously, now under the Steve Cohen era, it is completely different, kind of a fresh slate. And that includes money not being an issue. And I think this has to be at the forefront of all Pete Alonso talks. It is just a different era. And when you bake in all of the things that have always mattered for franchise players who are already great entering free agency, he's already an integral part of the fan base in Queens. And that is more important than what his contract could or would be if he does end up staying with the Mets. And I think both of those things have to have this equal importance in terms of Steve Cohen can afford it, and his legacy is huge, particularly after what happened in the playoffs last season.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it too, right? And you would think that going into this offseason, no matter what happens with the Mets this season, feels like Alonso's got all the leverage here right now. Last year, not so much with the season he had, but you would think he's got all the leverage here, right, Deesha?
He's definitely making it seem that way, particularly after he broke Darryl Strawberry's record and now he's the franchise home run king. I thought it was interesting that Pete was basically putting the ball in Steve Cohen and David Stern's court and saying, now it's up to them. And I did what I can do. And especially because he's on a deal, it was kind of a prove it deal with this player opt out. If the Mets were saying, what can you do for us? And he carried this club through the first 2 months of the season. The Mets would not even be hanging on to a playoff spot without Pete Alonso's performance in April. So I think he feels like he has done enough. He's feeling the love from the fan base. And now it is kind of up to ownership in that front office to keep him around.
Yeah, ball is absolutely in their court. We'll see what they do with it. It's going to be very interesting. But let's look at this Mets team because they've been struggling, Deesha. When you look at this Mets team and their struggles this year, particularly over the last 2 months, do you see it as just a short-term dip, or does it reveal deeper systemic issues that the front office needs to fix?
I think a little bit over the last few years, the fact that they are running into these stretches that really go over a prolonged period of time is that part of the systemic issue that you're referring to. And you can look at it right micro. You look at Francisco Lindor, he goes through these prolonged stretches with someone who has such an impact in that lineup. I think that is something to look at. But again, Francisco Lindor, we know at this point who he is for the Mets and how hard he plays and how hard he tries. So that a lot of these can be just individual struggles. And it comes down to, for me right now, just if the offense was performing as well as it should be and on a more consistent basis, then this team would be looking very different. And of course, the pitching went through its struggles, a lot of injuries there. Frankie Montas hasn't been who he was supposed to be. But even then, this offense was designed to overpower any of those pitching struggles. And that part of it, that end of the bargain has not held up. And I think that is more of an issue of this season. When you look at Pete Alonso, he is still, again, in another sort of contract year. Juan Soto getting adjusted to Queens, he kind of expected this sort of thing to happen his first year with the club. So these things I think will turn. And we say that, right? Like I think fans could be tired of hearing that year after year with these prolonged stretches, but it doesn't look too much systemic to me other than kind of individual concerns and roster holes that weren't necessarily filled to begin the season.
Yeah, and you know this, Deesha. When fans hear you say that things will turn, they're like, when? When is this going to happen? Why has this not happened already? And I think that's part of why I asked the question, right? Is it systemic or not? But it could be a one-off thing with this season. The hitters have definitely underperformed, as you've said, and that's been a huge disappointment. But I think you mentioned another disappointment in Frankie Montas. And his move to the bullpen, it was a big decision. It was one that I said last week on the show the team needed to make. How does that reflect the organization's handling of its pitching staff this season, and also maybe what kind of pitchers they will want or not want to sign as free agents going forward? Does this change David Stern's philosophy in any way at all when it comes to starting pitchers and bringing them into this rotation?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question to ask David Stearns and kind of have him bear the brunt of that topic. Does this change anything from your philosophy? Because the way that he handled this offseason to fill the Mets pitching staff was a very David Stearns MO way, in that he just kind of went for these arms that no one's really looking at, trusting on his own pitching lab, Jeremy Hefner too, pitching coach, to kind of help make these uncovered stones into gems, that sort of metaphor. And I think it worked with Griffin Canning before he went down with his injury. And that is also a loss, right? If he hadn't run into that injury, I think Griffin Canning was on his way to having a spectacular full season that we won't know. There were definitely some setbacks with Clay Holmes. I think we always knew he was going to hit a wall. He blew past his career innings total at the beginning of June, and they're still expecting him to go right up until the finish line. I think was always going to be difficult. And I'm not sure that the Mets always had enough depth in AAA at the top of their prospect list to kind of fill these holes if they weren't going to be aggressive. I think there's always two ways that they could have handled it. Were they ready to promote guys at AAA pitching in the beginning of the season if these struggles started early? They clearly were not, because they didn't, and they were always sort of going to wait until August to have that service time and have the rookie eligibility. And that was I mean, that's what clubs always do. So I think if that was the case, they needed to make it to August, and they didn't. They really fumbled there with the pitching staff. So I think moving Frankie Montas, like you said, was necessary. It had to happen. I think it should have definitely happened sooner. The writing was on the wall there.
So speaking of should have happened sooner, right? Now they're at a it's interesting point with Clay Holmes, because you just mentioned it. He's not able to give you the length. He's been stretched out further than he ever has been before. What do you think they should do with Clay Holmes here in terms of the rotation? Should he stay here where you know he can only maybe give you 5 innings? If it was you, if you were in David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza's shoes, would you move Clay Holmes?
Yeah, I think he definitely, his ERA has only gone up and up and up since June. And that is not as extreme as something like Frankie Montas, who just could not put up results. But when you add Clay Holmes' performance recently with Sean Manaea and sort of the entire pitching staff, then yeah, you have to take a closer look at what can they do. I think they have to wait now for Tyler McGill to get healthy and maybe replace him in the rotation and then move Clay Holmes to depth. But these are kind of decisions that the Mets don't have the luxury of thinking about right now. They have to win now. They can't plan for October. They don't have that luxury of someone like the Brewers or the Dodgers, who kind of slow play their injuries, who are just performing really well all year. Right now, the Mets just have to stack up wins and get in. And then they can talk about, does Clay Holmes make more sense in the bullpen in October? Probably at this point, right? How will Tyler McGill look coming out of his rehab? So there's definitely a lot of caution, and I don't think it would be necessarily a bad idea to continue looking out at calling up guys, since the latest example was a big success, right?
Yep, latest example, that's right where we're going to go. Nolan McLean. He was dazzling, made a splash in his debut, and I think some Mets fans would have said, hey, he should have been up here before. Now, that's arguable here, Deesha, but what stood out to you about his performance and how the organization is handling his development by bringing him up at the time that they did?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely looked at who he is as a person. Like, can he handle this pennant race, this responsibility of being kind of the savior now of this pitching staff? And I really liked even what he said yesterday, after his big start, of just, no, he doesn't really feel that responsibility, and he thinks he wants to go out there, put up wins, and pitch his best. So I think the character, the makeup was all there, but really seeing that arsenal live in major league action against a really good offense too in the Mariners was special. I think his curveball was everything everyone chalked it up to be, but even just the way he handled getting out of a jam, get back calmed down after Jeremy Hefner went out for a mound visit, that comebacker that he grabbed and snagged behind, and then kind of resetting the next time he was back out and just going back to the basics. I think it was definitely a good glimpse. He kind of left everyone wanting more, and I think that's exactly what we're going to get. I think the Mets still have to be careful with how they use him to make sure he doesn't get injured, and I think that's what we saw yesterday with Mendoza pulling him early, along with some innings limits, because as we know, the rookie eligibility for next season, he has to pitch 50 innings or less in order to qualify next year. So that is going to be at the top of the front office's mind as they let him go forward here.
It's going to be really interesting, because you also talked about the fact that they've got to try to win. And there's a way Nolan McLean can help them win games if he pitches the way he did and we saw on Saturday. One more follow-up on him, Deesha, because you talked about his curveball, the sweeper looking really good, having those hitters on the Mariners off balance. Do you like just him being in this rotation, the fact that he adds some pitch diversity to this rotation that maybe the Mets haven't had? From what we've seen, they have a lot of sinker-heavy pitchers. So him and what he brings in his arsenal, how good do you think that can help the Mets down the stretch, just seeing a pitcher who has a couple more pitches in his bag, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think his six pitch mix is a huge advantage, not just because the Mets don't really have that type of on their staff in their rotation, but also because hitters have not adjusted to that yet. I think it's going to take at least until next season for the book to be out on McLean. So I think right now, not just can he fool hitters with what he has and no one's ready for it. I think what he's doing and just simply throwing strikes and being aggressive and attacking the strike zone can be inspiring to the rest of the pitching staff. So they know they're struggling. I think looking at a rookie, a kid like Nolan McLean can help in that way. And pitching is contagious. We saw it last year with this Mets team. There's sort of a ripple effect of how good they were unexpectedly. So I think, again, this is a lot to place on a rookie's shoulders. As long as he doesn't look at it that way, I think the Mets kind of have a pretty good advantage here going into the stretch run.
Yeah, let's see how they use it. It's going to be very interesting. You talk about they try to limit his innings moving down the stretch. Now, look, the Mets, Deesha, they've talked about being competitive now, right? And also building for the future. But based on what you've seen, can they actually walk that line successfully? Is it possible for them to do that?
I think so. I'm definitely seeing them do the right things in terms of development, especially after these past few years also covering the Yankees heavily. That is a club that handles their player development completely differently than the Mets in a way that is not always advantageous in terms of just kind of sticking with who they have from the start and not necessarily adjusting based on how that development could be going in the big leagues. An example being of Anthony Volpe. Fans were asking for him to be maybe sent down for a little to focus back on his approach. That never happened, and they just needed to run Volpe out there because there was no good backup shortstop. Whereas you switch to Mets and you look at the example of Francisco Alvarez, who looked completely different earlier this season, and the Mets were completely fine with demoting him and telling him to work on some things, and he came back looking like the old Alvy. So the Mets are handling this unemotionally, and I wouldn't expect anything less from a David Stearns-led front office. I think it is pleasantly surprising that Steve Cohen is also kind of allowing that to be the case. He always says, I'm leaving it up to the baseball people. I don't really get in there. As long as he hires smart people to lead the front office, he's going to stay out of it. And I think that is a strategy that can work when it comes to what he's always said, and that he wants to be the Dodgers long term and call guys up and also land splashy free agents and put it all together, and it should lead to a championship team.
Which is what Mets fans want to see, and they got to be a little bit patient. At least you hope they can be. But, we're both New Yorkers. We know
They've
that.
been plenty patient enough. But
yeah. Yeah, we know. The Mets fans are like, we've been patient for a long time, Deesha. They're like, we've been waiting for a long time. So I'll end with this, right? Because while this has been a rough stretch for the Metropolitans, is there anything from this recent homestand that makes you believe that they can actually turn it around before September? Because I've been saying this, Deesha, it is getting late early for this Mets team. So have you seen anything recently that makes you say, okay, they can actually turn this around?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm seeing a really good attitude in that clubhouse. I think with the stretch that they've had, it's easiest to get down on yourself, beat yourself up, and kind of be in this sunken hole place that mentally that no team wants to be in with what the mountain that they have to climb now. And they're not. I think they're really handling the dips and the valleys really well. There is a sense of urgency, but not to the point where they're trying too hard or pressing too much. And we've seen them kind of get out of these slumps, but what we still need to see, right, is for them to maintain it and build some consistency. So that is the one thing that I'm still waiting to see. And until then, I think they're handling the dips and the valleys okay, but really we need to see them flourish when they have any sort of winning streak, if they can even get to that point.
Yeah, they need a winning streak badly. They need to string some wins together. That will be nice to see. We'll see if they're able to do that as they head out onto the road this week. That is Deesha Thosar. Check her out, Fox Sports MLB reporter. Got to make sure we get that right. Deesha, I appreciate you coming through on Straight Outta Flushing. I will see you at Citi Field soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
So, joining me now for another Dugout Discussions is WFAN producer and diehard Mets fan, Ray Jarvis. Ray, he's been living through the ups and downs of the season just like every other fan. And let's be honest, there's been a lot more lows lately than highs. So we're going to tap into that fan perspective, break down some of the decisions that this front office has made, and try to get a sense of where the Mets faithful are as we head towards September. Ray joins me now. Ray, I appreciate you coming on, man. How you doing?
Dex, thanks for having me. This is our second time getting together, and I'm excited. Although the Mets have been disappointing me, I am excited to talk some Mets.
Well, look, I got to let the people know, because I saw Ray the other day, and Ray said to me, hey, when are you going to have me on to talk some Mets? I got some things to say. I said, look,
Yes.
say less. We got to get it done. So now I got you here with some things to say. Ray, you're a diehard Mets fan. We know this, as I said in the intro. So we're gonna keep it real here. We're gonna start here. We're gonna keep it real. We're gonna talk about some of the negatives with this Mets team, and Lord knows there's been a lot of them lately. They've dropped a lot of games recently, and I assume that you are not happy about this at all. So how do you process this level of frustration as a fan with what you've been seeing over, we'll say, the last 2 months?
It's been completely disgusting. I can't pull any punches. When it comes to the New York Mets, all of the hype, all of the energy surrounding the season, of course, signing Juan Soto, coming off of a NLCS run, there was a lot of high expectations for this team. But at the same time, with those expectations, we knew that this roster had a lot of faults. There was questions about pitching. There was questions about the depth of the lineup after the Fab Four, the Fantastic Four, or whatever the hell Mr. Cohen calls them. So we had our doubts and our questions about this team. And at the top of the season, I think there was a lot of found money, a lot of positive energy to start. But as the Mets started to fall off, you started to see the issues that we questioned in the offseason. Is the pitching good enough? Do we have enough offense? And I would say that teams have exposed it from the time Kodai Senga got hurt. I think it was June 12th. The Mets record from that point forward has been 21-34. They have not been a good team. It's not about even being positive anymore. It's about the reality is, in my eyes, currently constituted, this is not a good baseball team, and the results show that.
I mean, look, it's fair to say that. Some people are going to say, okay, Ray, the vibes are not what they were last year. There's even been some people who said they need to bring Grimace back and all that stuff. I see your I'm with you. I'm with you. Do you think there's anything that could turn the vibes of this team around, or is it just about, winning right now? Or, I don't know, you might be Team Grimace or Team bring back G2 or something like that. Where were you on bringing the good vibes back?
I don't know about Grimace, but baseball is a very fickle thing. Like, it's not like any other sport where you can say we're going to put the best guys together. You put the best football players together, you have a good chance to win in the Super Bowl. NBA, if you stack your squad in the NBA, you can make a finals run. Baseball is not, as much as it is talent driven, there's always a little bit of randomness involved in the season. And having a guy like Iglesias, having a JD Martinez as well, and not even so much production wise, but in the locker room, I think that some of that energy, yes, is missing. I would have brought Iglesias back. I would have found a way to keep him around that team, because there's a thing about this Mets group, especially the core players, not so much Juan Soto. I won't put that on him because he just got here. But Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso, in my opinion, those guys are front runners. When things are going really well for the Mets, those guys are leading the charge. They're waving the towel at the top of the dugout. Everything is great. But when it hits the fan and things are not going well, you cannot depend on those guys. You go back to 2022, when the wheels fell off, where were those three guys where we needed them to carry us in those moments? Last season, when the Mets season turned around, it was JD Martinez and Iglesias who were the linchpins of that. That's when you added in Jesse Winkler at the trade deadline as well. Those are the names you heard a lot about. Yes, you heard Lindor MVP, but in the clubhouse, the grown men that were carrying that team were players that you let walk. So I think they made a grave mistake not keeping energy guys around. We talk about the Yankees a lot of times. Think about Nick Swisher as an example. He might not have been the best baseball player, but he's great to be around. And you need guys like that in your clubhouse to pick you up when things go badly. You see, you're on a free fall as the Mets right now. 21-34 since June 12th. To me, that's a free fall. You had a 7-game losing streak during that period. Then you had another time frame where you lost 12 out of 13 games. You need grown men who are not front runners in that locker room that can say, yo, listen, let's grab our you-know-what. Let's go out there and play the game hard. Let's stop losing, and let's stop losing in embarrassing fashion. It's not like they're losing and they're not competitive. They're building leads, and then as soon as the other team fights back, they just fold up the tent and go home. You need men in there. And Lindor showing some fire. Ferris Fence smacking the glove on the ground in Milwaukee, and now throughout post-Milwaukee, he looks like the Lindor we know and love. But you need more of that. You need your fabulous four, the guys that get paid the big bucks. They have to step up. They have to lead. And it's not just about stats. It's about fire and want to. And I'm not sure if I see that from those guys.
No, it's fair to question that. Lindor, I give credit. He's turned it around in the last week. He's done his thing at the plate. So he's shown up as a leader. But you're right. You're going to need more. But look, when the hitting has gone right, the pitching hasn't been right in the starters. No. Then the pen hasn't been right. And speaking of the pitching, the move to send Frankie Montas to the bullpen. I called for this last week, and I just talked with Deesha Thosar about this. As a fan, what did you make of the decision, one, to sign Montas last offseason? And then what are your thoughts on his demotion here? Was it the right move, and do you think this will actually help the Mets?
Here's where I'll give some flowers to our GM, Mr. Stearns. By moving Montas into the bullpen, you are admitting that your move to pay this man $17 million per over 2 years with a player option is a fail. So I have to give credit where it's due, because a lot of GMs will go down with the ship because that's my name attached to that signing. So I need him to do well, and he will get every opportunity to do well. But by moving him to the bullpen, you're understanding that this season is at a turning point, and we need to have our best guys as starters going forward. Now, where I'm going to take that bouquet that I just handed Stearns back from him is he should have never been signed in the first place. It's not like Montas has been good and he was a steal of a signing. He's been bad for the last 2 to 3 seasons. So to give this man a 2-year deal, not even a team option, a player option. So for all intents and purposes, we got to deal with Montas next season. So you're going to have a Montas who's a starter coming out of the bullpen, or you're going to give him another chance to start and be sorry once again. So to me, that was a poor decision. If you're going to give Frankie Montas 2 years, $34 million, then you should have just paid Severino and brought him back at 3 years, 75. The disparity is not that grand for you to say, no, we don't want him, but we want him. I think the whole pitching lab and the idea that they can fix anyone, they got too cute. And now we're seeing the results of getting too cute. At some point, you have to go out there and get boutique, high-quality arms. You can't keep getting reclamation projects and hoping they work out when you're trying to chase a championship. To me, that's literal hustling backwards.
Well, look at you. Got to go get the boutique quality arms. No thrift
Have
stores
to get the
stopping.
boutique. No, we've been
that.
thrifting. You can't do the thrifty stuff and win a championship. I'm sorry.
I understand. Listen, right before the trade deadline, Daniel McCartan was on the show. She said David Stearns could not be small market Stearns, and you were critical of him on the Montas move here. But I want to talk to you about him at the deadline, because at the deadline, Mr. Stearns went all in on the pen, right? Ryan Helsley. Be nice. He's been shaky since he arrived in Flushing. I see your face. I see your face, Ray. Do you still trust the front office's plan when it comes to bullpen decisions, especially what you've seen out of Helsley early on? Does that give you any pause for cause here?
Absolutely. Because in order for you to quantify the super bullpen, your starting pitching has to get you to said bullpen. And the starting pitching, which was an issue in the postseason last year, we ran out of gas, we ran out of arms. The Dodgers ran us off the field by the end of that series because we didn't have the starting pitching to compete. This is not like a situation where guys got hurt and we had the starters. It was an issue that you got cute about. And then instead of deciding, you know what, let's trade for arm. The Mets, when they went to Miami earlier in the season, as a team, they were all essentially campaigning to get Cindy Alcantara to Queens. Then you don't trade for him. But then you decide you're going to fortify the bullpen, which on its face makes a lot of sense because you need a lot of arms in the postseason. But you have to get to the postseason first. And getting to the postseason means having starting pitchers who can give you at least 6 innings of competitive baseball, not 6 innings of lollipops and BP quality pitches. And that's what this starting rotation has been doing. And they're not even giving us 6 innings. These guys are not even getting through the 4th innings a lot of times. So to me, while I understood the move and I gave flowers again for making the trade to fortify the bullpen, you need to have your starters put your bullpen in a position to be successful, especially when you have a batting order littered with front runners who are not built to make comebacks after your starting pitchers put you in positions to fail. So to me, you have to have the starter pitching in tow. And then you look at Mendy, when you do get the super bullpen, then he's still leaning on guys like Stanek, He's still leaning on guys like Garrett, guys who have proven time and time again that they're not getting it done. Brazoban got sent down. He was another guy that, for some reason, Mendy trusts way too much. So all of these things considered, it's looking like a fail right now. Like none of these decisions, when you put it together, you put all of the ingredients and you try to make something. If this was the episode of Chopped, the Mets would be chopped right now.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good there. Now, look, I agree with you. Starters have to be better. They got to get it. It's no use. It's of no use to anyone and to this Mets team if you have a super pen, but you can't get to the super pen, right? It doesn't matter at all whatsoever. Now, the Mets need some length out of the starters. We've known this. We've been talking about this for weeks on the show. And then we saw on Saturday, Nolan McLean. I think his debut felt like a breath of fresh air here. I think Mets fans were really excited about this. I see you nodding your head. Did that performance change your hope or energy around this season? Did it make you say, I'm not saying that you should have said the Mets are back. I'm not saying that. But did that give you a little bit of hope to say, okay, we've got somebody here that can do things a little bit differently, give us some pitch diversity, add some length to the starting rotation? Did it give you any hope at all, Ray?
For that singular moment, yes, absolutely gave me hope, because at the same time, as much as I've been critical and emotional, fair is fair, I have been emotional about the Mets. If you're telling me that we didn't make a trade for a big starting pitcher because we know we have what we have in the farm, and I know how it works when you call up players at a certain time, how it impacts your time with the organization as far as when they become a free agent. If these are the plays that were in motion before you decided to bring McLean up, okay, then I'll take back some of my vigor. But now that he's here, the first start, he could have wet the bed. He did not. Strong start, but now that he's started now and the information is out about him, you know how it goes. It's all good when no one knows you. But now that people have seen you and the tape is out on you and players get to study your tendencies and your pitches and what are your arm slots like when you throw this pitch? Is it the same arm slot when you're throwing an off speed as opposed to a fastball? Things of that nature. Once that information gets out, is he the real deal? We will have to see. But that is absolutely a step in the right direction.
Nah, I feel like you got to be excited about that. But like you said, for the moment, not going to go too far on that. Now, with the way that things have been going with this team, and this team, when you look at it, with how everything's happened, they could be staring at one of the most disappointing seasons in franchise history because of the expectations after signing Juan Soto, because a lot of people said, okay, can they push the Dodgers and try to get to the World Series? How do you think, as a fan, that the fan base is going to respond in September if the losses keep piling up the way we've seen over these last couple of weeks?
Well, you've been getting a taste of it with this latest skid. The Met fans have been, I would say, more patient than I ever remember them being. But then when you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning and they're not showing any fight, they're going out sad, the boo birds show up. And I think if this continues into September, all of that great energy, all of the Steve Cohen saying, hey, guys, come to the stadium, fill up the seats, it'll be a lot of filled seats for booers. They're going to be upset and they're going to boo these guys off of the field because at the end of the day, I'm not a pocket watcher, let's be clear. But if you sign a guy for $765 million, you have another player that's about $334 million. Pete Alonso's in the walk year. There's people who've always kind of felt like Brandon Nimmo was a bit overpaid, and they start counting the money. City Field isn't cheap. You got to pay $40 to park. The food is expensive. These fans want a winner. So all these things considered, if the Mets don't show up in September and they look like the same old Mets, expect a parade of boos.
Hey, that's all you can expect. Okay, last thing for me here, Ray. As a fan, what do you need to see the rest of the way to feel, let me use this word again, hope? Any sense of hope that you might have had early in the season. If we go back to the spring, when hope was springing eternal, everything felt good. It's getting nice outside. You were feeling good about the Mets. Clearly, you are not feeling the same way. But what do you need to see over the next couple of weeks? And I really mean these next 2 weeks, because you can't get through to September with the losing continuing. So right. What do you need to see from this team that's going to make you feel like, okay, the vibes are good going to September. They can make a serious playoff push, maybe even get back in the divisional race. What do you need to see?
I think more than anything else, I just need to see some fight from the entire team. Go get it, man. You're a New York team. And part of the reason why we fell in love with the Mets last season was not only because they were a Cinderella story, let's call it what it is. No one expected the Mets to be where they were, but they showed a lot of fight, a lot of tenacity. They were never out of a game. We need to see some of that again. And more importantly, beyond that, pitching. If the starters can get back and find some kind of mojo where they're giving you 6 decent to strong innings, giving the bullpen and the lineup a chance to win games late, I think the Mets will be in good shape.
All right. There's some positivity for the people. Ray has not been happy with what he's seen lately from the Mets, but some positivity. Look, they got to turn things around, got to pitch better. We will see if all that can happen. That's my guy, Ray Jarvis. Check him out. He does a lot of production on WFAN and Infinity Sports Network as well. Ray, I hope things get better, because if not, I know you're going to text me with some angry texts about the Mets. We don't need any more of that.
Messages with full caps, angry.
That's not the kind of energy you want. We're hoping it gets better for the Mets fan. We just hope.
I still
and
want
for
a
you.
parade, Dex.
You say you're still doing what?
I still want a parade. I want the parade this season.
Well, yeah, you want the parade, not the parade of booze that you were talking about earlier. That's what you don't want. You want the parade. So hopefully that can happen. We will see. Appreciate you, Ray.
Thank you, man.
Alonso passed Darryl Strawberry for the most home runs in Mets history. It was only right that Straw had a message for him. And he did it in style.
Hey, what's up, Pete? Darryl Strawberry here. I just want to say congratulations on breaking the home run record. Listen, you have worked hard. You have stood up in the pressure of New York City, and you have played well. It is well-deserved. You are a homegrown player. And again, congratulations and continue to have great success. All the best, buddy.
Now, Major League Baseball, they dropped a dope video that showed both of their record-breaking home runs side by side. Really cool to see that in split screen. I think it was really dope for baseball fans, particularly Mets fans, to get to see how both of the slugging superstars look. Now, what made this even better was Alonso's reaction to seeing Straw's message.
The fact that we have like an in-person, face-to-face relationship, it's awesome. I mean, he's just one of those guys that means so much to this organization, and yeah, it's really awesome to have a relationship with him.
There's no doubt. It's a passing of the torch moment, right? Strawberry, the face of power for the Mets in the 80s, to Alonso, the face of power in this era for the Mets. And for fans, seeing that mutual respect between generations just makes the record feel that much bigger. So yeah, Pete's bat is writing history, but he's also keeping the connection to the past strong. And that's something that every Mets fan can appreciate. Okay, for the final out this week, we've got to talk about Clay Holmes. And let's keep it a buck. It might be time to move him back to the bullpen. Now, why, you might ask? Well, start with the velocity. Holmes' fastball and sinker are down more than 3 miles per hour from last year. In fact, he's had the biggest velo drop in all of baseball this season. That's not just a blip. That's a red flag. And you can see it in the results. He's relying even more on his sinker lately. But it's just not fooling hitters. Over his last 5 starts heading into Sunday, batters have been hitting 400, 500, even 700 slugging against that pitch in some outings. He's missing spots, falling behind in counts, and when you live in the zone with a 93-mile-per-hour sinker, big league hitters, they're going to smack that. Another factor, stamina. This is a guy who hasn't been a full-time starter since his rookie year in 2018. He's already doubled his innings total from last season, and it's only mid-August. The arm looks tired, and the stuff just isn't playing up. But Holmes' struggles aren't just a him problem. They're a Mets rotation problem. This team leans too heavily on similar sinker ball pitchers. When every starter is giving hitters a steady diet of the same look, it makes it a lot easier for opponents to adjust over a series. And that's where Nolan McLean comes in. His debut showed you exactly what this staff has been missing. Mid-90s heat, a nasty sweeping slider with elite spin, a cutter, a changeup, even a curve that he can mix in. That's 5 legitimate pitches. That kind of diversity forces hitters to think, to adjust, to get uncomfortable in the box. And look, the Mets, they need more of that. Since the All-Star break, their starters are throwing the fewest first pitch strikes in baseball. They're constantly behind in counts, throwing the most pitches per inning in the league. Holmes and Senga, they're both in the top 10 for most pitches per frame. That's not sustainable. So, where does this leave us? Holmes to the pen makes a lot of sense. Let him unleash his stuff in shorter bursts, where the velo might tick back up, and he doesn't have to survive lineups 3 times through. And in the rotation, let another young arm like McLean bring some badly needed variety. The bottom line here is this: if the Mets want to salvage this rotation and give themselves any shot at staying competitive down the stretch, they've got to shake up the roles. Holmes in the pen, McLean in the rotation, and bring up another young starter like Brandon Sproat. That feels like the move. Thanks to my producer, Erica Block, for this week's episode. Also, associate producer, Nick Federico, editor, Eduardo Guerrero, and production assistant, Tommy Cohen. I'm Dexter Henry. We're going to catch you next time on Straight Outta Flushing.